Guys, a very exciting, very fun episode. I've got the mad scientist, Mr. Chris Duffin, on. Chris is a world champion power lifter. He was ranked number one for many years, broke the world records for squats, broke the world record for deadlifts. He has been the author of many best-selling, award-winning books. He is the owner of Kabuki Strength, Bearfoot style shoes. It's going to be a phenomenal episode. Many of you, if you've ever heard of Chris, he grew up homeless in the mountains, literally running around barefoot, having to chase his own food or he didn't eat, dumpster diving for food. I mean, it's a crazy story from homeless in the mountains to incredibly successful. And then quitting his career and stopping everything to pursue what he was passionate about. It's packed full of inspirational stories to help you overcome and to help you become more. But also we talk a whole lot about barefoot style shoes. We talk a whole lot about barefoot boots and training your foot and ankle to be stronger, training your foot and ankle to be used. A lot of people have very weak ankles and feet, which are going to cause a lot of issues with their knees, their hips, their backs. So we talk about wearing and using barefoot style shoes and boots in order to train that foot and that ankle mechanism. Now, Chris is of the opinion that he would chase elk in the mountains, has chased elk in the mountains, know people who chase elk in the mountains with a barefoot boot on. However, I'm of the opinion that I'm going to use that shoe to train and build that foot and ankle. But then when I head to the mountains, I'm still going to throw my Schnee boot on. That way my foot and ankle is still stronger than the average person, but I'm still throwing on the protection for the mountain. Guys, it's a very informational episode about training the foot and the ankle to help you be more successful on the mountain. We hear some crazy cool stories and inspirational stuff. Guys, as always, this episode is brought to you by ScentLock, and I hope that you enjoy.
With over 90 years of innovation, Bear Archery continues pushing toward the goal of founder Fred Bear, making archery accessible for all. Fred believed the history of the bow and arrow were the history of mankind, and everyone should immerse themselves in the outdoor experience. Welcome to the Bear Archery Podcast, where the mission is simple: to hunt, grow, and inspire others.
Guys, I'm not a gun guy. You're listening to the Bear Archery Podcast. I'm a bow hunter. I enjoy archery. However, guns are a necessity for outdoorsmen. I need an everyday carry pistol. I need a shotgun to shoot birds with. I need a truck gun. I need a gun to shoot coyotes with. I need a lightweight gun to pack in the mountains if I'm on a bear hunt and need backup. There are times where I need a gun. And I am the type of guy, like I said, I don't study guns. I don't know a lot about guns. So when I'm in need of a gun, I just call somebody. My favorite place on earth has become Powder and String Outfitters in Wellington, Kansas. I love the creaky old floor, the rustic decor, the fact that they just take you back to a time where Main Street shops were experts in their trade. It's one of the best feelings walking into that place because you feel like you're walking back in time. Powder and String Outfitters has just launched an online website where you can shop the largest selection of in-stock guns and ammo that you will find anywhere, and the best prices guaranteed. Powderandstring.com. Guys, here's my favorite part. Call them. Ask them questions. Ask them, tell them what you're looking for in a gun, what you want to get out of it, what you want to use it for, and they're going to point you in the right direction. How do I know that? Because I have to do that every time I need a new gun. So guys, go to powderandstring.com for your next gun, for your ammo, for your clips, for all of your hunting accessories, trail cameras, tree stands. They've got it all. They've got archery equipment too, but they are my gun experts that I trust, that I go to all of the time when I've got questions about guns. Powderandstring.com. Go check them out. You can shop online. You can figure it all out. The guns will ship straight to your house. It's an incredibly easy process to go through. Guys, they've got everything you could ever need. powderandstring.com. All right, Chris. So I am excited to kind of unpack the mad scientist, Mr. Chris Duffin. First off, it's an absolute honor and privilege to have you on. I'm a big fan of yours. And so I am excited to kind of dive into this. But before we get into kind of the foot and ankle and how to, train that and strengthen that and the benefit of barefoot style shoes, give us an introduction to yourself, man.
Yeah, they call me the mad scientist, not a name I made up, but because I kind of go deep on things, and a lot of times when I start doing things, it's very counter to what is common out there, and it's a little out there, and then all of a sudden people realize just what it is and how different it is. I have a unique lens of looking at things, and so. It doesn't sound like a whole lot of useful stuff. So let me dig a little deeper here. Resilience is like my jam, like being able to help people get stronger, body, mind, soul. And the reason I am so passionate about that, I've made that my life, is I've lived that. I grew up homeless in the wilderness. This is Northern California. Some of this is an area called Murder Mountain. There's a documentary on it. And so if you read I've got a best-selling autobiography. If you read it and you hear stories around murderers, drug running, human trafficking, serial killer this is corrupt police. Like this is the life that I lived in that arena. So it opens up with me at 6 years old, with a live rattlesnake in my hand because I was taught how to capture and handle those at that age, because this is the environment that we lived in. And so there's a lot of, you can imagine growing up in that lifestyle, a lot of struggle and strife that, one may encounter. And so that happened to people. A lot of people didn't make it around me. And that's just how I grew up. And so I ended up putting myself, got myself in a good position to be able to take care of myself, get into college on some academic scholarships. And I ended up getting while I work full time, got a dual engineering degree and then my MBA. And at the same time started raising my sisters. I took custody of my 3 younger sisters and raised them while I was doing this. And then, so that's it. The deep backstory of where that passion comes from. But, being physical, being in the mountains, doing things has been just a cornerstone of my life for a long time. And I took that into weight training, started training. And again, I was chasing this career in the industrial sector, ended up becoming a corporate executive doing turnarounds in the aerospace, automotive, high-tech worlds. But I owned a gym on the side. And I wanted to be the best strength athlete in the world. So I started making the right tools and making my own equipment. And then I started getting some injuries, and so I started doing more research, and I ended up doing a lot of clinical continuing education for a number of years in developmental kinesiology, biomechanics, neurology. I ended up doing about 10 years total of that. And at one point, I just decided it was time to walk away from my career. So this is the first half of my book is all this, finding your strengths, discovering your capabilities, and that nothing really holds you back. But the second half of my book, The Eagle and the Dragon, is this purposeful reinvention of oneself. And so, I found myself, I was living in a house with a white picket fence, had an amazing career, was sought after for doing what I did. I had my hobby. I had a gym on the side. I was ranked number 1 in the world for years straight as a power lifter. And I decided to basically quit all of that. So it seemed the most logical thing to me at the time. And was building off-road rigs in my garage. And I started Kabuki Strength and shortly thereafter Bearfoot Shoes, and then Build Fast Formula Supplement Company. But I'd been putting out content, on YouTube since 2007, and somewhere around 2010, I just started putting out educational content based on what I was learning and the gaps that I saw. And again, I was designing my own equipment for the gym to get joints in the right positions, to get the right things to happen. And then I'd also started sharing some of my personal stories. And as a whole, like, I found that I was having a pretty profound impact on people around the globe. And I was like, this is where I need to be. Like, I need to help people get out of pain, live a better quality of life, learn how to be stronger, more resilient, provide the tools. And so it's kind of scary, but I quit my job, ended up selling my house. I did a lot of introspect. There was a lot of changes that happened. I ended up going through a divorce. I ended up quitting powerlifting and competing or doing my strength stuff in a different realm. And yeah, that's been kind of the story. And yeah, within the strength training, for example, I ended up penetrating sports performance faster than any other company in history with Kabuki Strength. So I work with 100%, every single Major League Baseball team out there, about 70 or 80% of the NFL and NBA, any big name college you can think of, 900 more. The foot mechanic stuff, like, I was the first one to start talking about that in the strength training realm, and people were calling me crazy because you'd watch my big lifts. I did this thing where I for 5 years, I chased being the first person and only person to both squat 1,000 pounds and deadlift 1,000 pounds. I called it the grand goals, to, inspire people that you can do more, but at the same time to demonstrate my methods. People are like, oh my God, you're squatting and deadlifting with no shoes. At the time, it was unheard of. Like, that's got to be so much harder. No, it's actually easier when you develop a strong foot. And so now that whole paradigm in the strength training world has really started to shift quite a bit. And so it's things like that's where the mad scientist comes from. So I play in a lot of different realms. Anybody watching this can see a foot there behind me. But the foot mechanics is been, we'll say, foundational in some of the mechanics side.
So I've got so much that I want to talk about. Because one thing that, if you've ever listened to this podcast, you've heard me talk about prioritizing your feet. Because I've been on the mountains in a Cabela's pair of boots and cotton socks, and day 3, you're like, oh, I hate my life. And so I've talked a lot about prioritizing your feet with a good set of boots and merino wool socks and, a liner sock that's going to pull the moisture away. I've talked about all that stuff. So you can stay on the mountain longer, hunt longer, be more effective. And so I started lifting years ago barefoot, like not even really knowing why I did. But it was just more comfortable. So I would work my way up in weights, and then when I would get, up there, and not anywhere near 1,000, but when I would start getting up there, I would take off my shoes, not even knowing why. I just didn't like the slippage in the foot. I like to feel the weight distribution throughout my feet. And again, didn't even really know why. And just this past weekend, I was at the First Form headquarters in St. Louis training with those guys. And we were working up in deadlifts, and I took my shoes off, and they're like, what are you doing, freak? And I'm like, this is how I lift, bro. Had I had my barefoot shoes there, I would have put them on. But that's just, and I didn't really know why I did this. But then I stumble on Bearfoot Shoes. My brother's a power lifter. And so he's like, well, dude, this is what I've been wearing. And so stumbled on Bearfoot Shoes, and then the release of Barefoot Boots come out. And this all just kind of built into this idea of prioritizing your feet for the mountain. And so I'm really excited to talk about a whole lot of stuff, but I do want to go back to a couple things. First off, on the being raised homeless in the mountains. A, what caused that? And B, what did that build in you? It obviously made you into the man you are today. But what did that cause you to kind of, obviously you probably excelled faster than not probably, you excelled faster than the kids who sit in front of a TV all day doing nothing. But let's start with, like, what caused you to have to live that lifestyle?
Yeah. My mom had a pretty rough, things happened to her during her course of growing up. And she really grew a distaste for authority, we'll say it, and really didn't want to be part of society. And she decided to figure out how to make that happen. And so we first ended up, in a homestead kind of with another family in the mountains just north of the San Francisco area. And then later moved up into what's the Trinity Wilderness, which is a little east of Humboldt County, kind of a little bit deeper. And this is in the 80s. And so that was the golden triangle of weed growing. And so there was people running around with machine guns and like all sorts of wild stuff. And so we were about 50 miles kind of deeper and more remote than where that documentary I mentioned took place. And that's really the case. My parents were, they were doing that. They were in the drug trade. And then we got taken by the state for a while, and parents finally got us back a year later. And we ended up in Oregon, where they got out of, we're not in the drug trade because they didn't want to risk losing us again. And they still didn't want to be part of society. So it was a lot of, prospecting, mining, logging, those sorts of things. And so that's the reason why. Now, what it instilled in me, I've thought back on, and I'm always creating things. I'm always looking for ways to improve or use the things that I have and look at resources in a different manner. And if I trace that back, I can think about stories or think about myself like being in a garbage dump, and it's like as a shopping trip, like we would be out trying to find different things, or I'd be on a condemned piece of property. If we were living in town, there was, we found this, home one time that no one was occupied. It was, no windows, completely gutted, but there was a, big pile of old garbage that had been strewn for years. And it's like you find a rusty part of a bike and different things. And so it was always just like within everybody else's garbage, finding these things that I could like put together and build and make and craft. And so that is definitely something that is had me continue to look at things in a different way. And also the resourcefulness and just the creativity that came from that, for sure. And the physical nature. I mean, I was always out there helping, whether it was growing the crops, whether it was logging, whether it was splitting wood, mining, packing, big giant packs, up the side of the ravines out of the where we were mining at. And so that physical nature, but also the diligence to do the research and dig in. So the only thing that we, was our cornerstone was like every few weeks getting into the library and getting a giant stacks of books. And you just sit there. And in the evening, that's all you had was, a candle or a flashlight, and just be reading and consuming knowledge, or sitting around the fire talking. And those are like the dichotomy of kind of extremes there that I had was around this pursuit of, I guess, intellectual side and the physical side. So when I got into school, I was definitely very much like the nerd. I graduated valedictorian. I had the highest graduating engineering GPA when I graduated college, even though at that time I didn't even go to school or buy books because I was just like working and I just didn't need to. I could show up and take tests. Not really proud of that, but you do what you do to get by. But at the same time, like I was tough as nails, and, I was supposed to wrestle in college. I didn't because I ended up getting a full ride academic somewhere else. But, I went all the way through my districts and all the way through state without even having up to the final match without having a single offensive point scored against me. Got a little cocky and made some stupid decisions and got beat by the 4-time state champ at the final match. But, this balance of those two things, I think, came out of that as well.
That's cool, man. So like you've literally seen both sides of it. And for those of you who don't know, like, and we're going to get into the mechanism of the foot and ankle and how that should be trained for the mountain. And, I immediately, when I started thinking about how this episode would go, I immediately started thinking about how, like, yeah, but when you start looking at, you know, mountains in Idaho and you pack out an elk, like, you got to have a stiff foot, a stiff boot, and ankle support, and, you know, all this stuff. And so then I started thinking, I'm like, but dude, Chris lives in Oregon. Like, and if you've never been to Oregon, Oregon has some insane terrain. Like Hell's Canyon is insane. And so I just started thinking about that, and I'm really anxious to unpack all that and get to that. But I do want to hit, I do kind of want to hit the pursuit of breaking the world record in squat real quick before we kind of dive into all that, because I am excited to hear that too. So what does that look like, man? You come out of college, you know, a successful wrestler. You've went from homeless on the mountain to now standing on some of the biggest stages ever. How does that pursuit look, man?
Yeah. So I started competing in 2000, like a couple years after college. You know, I'd still been lifting. And then as soon as I did my first meet, I was like, this I'm just doing. And then I did that for quite some time. I was ranked number 1 in the world for like 8 years straight in either the squat or the deadlift. I set the all-time world record on the deadlift a couple different times. But I reached a point of like, I wanted to be the absolute best, and I had damage to both of my elbows. And so it was really limiting me on the bench press. And so I decided that I was going to chase doing 1,000-pound squat and 1,000-pound deadlift, because it would show, well, one, I'm not a specialist in one or the other, but it would show like the priorities of how I look at the human body, which is what has the largest global impact. And the number one is our ability to manage our breathing and spinal mechanics as it relates to managing the diaphragm and its resources. And the number two being the foot and ankle complex. And so two fundamental lifts: squatting down and picking something up off the ground. That's freaking it, right? And usually there's like half a dozen people that have done one or the other over 1,000 pounds, but nobody's ever done both, because it's a lot of like limb length and, you know, it's just like, what are you built for? And I'm like, I'm going to do both. And I'm going to leave no questions about it. I'm going to do them for reps. And so the first one I did was the deadlift in 2016. And so I did 1,001 pounds for just about 3 reps. I didn't quite lock out the third rep. And then the squat was a more challenging one for me. So that was a Guinness World Record on the deadlift. Nobody sumo deadlifted 1,000 pounds ever before. And nobody done 1,000 pounds for reps, any style, any weight class, whatever. And so also I was at the time the lightest person to ever done it. 1,000 pounds. Like I said, there's
Didn't you weigh like
6 people that had. Time? I weighed 260 at the time.
Oh, okay.
But everybody else that had done it weighed around 380 to 440, mostly in the 420 to 440 range. So 260 is small when you're talking that kind of weight. And so then I started working on training. It was pretty insane. It was pretty intense. And the squat took me quite a bit later. So both of them were like a year dedicated effort. But I spent a couple years like building again more with the weight being up higher on my shoulders. I had to build up some more back strength to be able to support and control it. And then I finally felt I was ready. Went in the last year preparation in 2019. And I was supposed to do this at the URSA exhibition down in San Diego, which is the largest gym equipment thing, except it happened like the same exact week that they started shutting down for COVID. It happened on that Saturday. So it got canceled like that week. So we switched to a local event, which then that got canceled. So we did a live stream because this was something I've been training for years, and I couldn't like extend it. I couldn't come back sometime later. Like it was like, have to do this. So, and there's actually a documentary that was shot on that. They haven't, the producer hasn't quite finished editing it. He's working on hopefully getting that out fairly soon. which you should see on the streaming services. And it tells a lot of the backstory, some of the stuff that's in my book. Although people should check that out. It's on Audible if you want as well. So nice, easy, digestible, lots of lessons in there. And yeah, I mean, it was, a lot of people go like, how brutal was that to squat 1,000 pounds for 3 reps? I'm like, it's easy, man. The training for it, that was insane. Like, so I had to use all of my mad scientist, approach to managing that. The final phase of that was like, all I did was recovery and preparation every week for one training session. And then I'd go in there and I would squat 9 repetitions every workout, heavy, work up to 900 pounds and then have my working sets, which would have to average. I think it was 3 months out. My average load was 950 pounds for 9 repetitions. And by the time I finished, my average load was 985 pounds for a total. And I do that over 3 sets. And I can't tell you the things that I had to do to be able to get myself put together and just how brutal that was. Sounds really simple, but it was freaking destroyed me. Not meant for somebody. I don't know anybody. So both my deadlift and my squat training, because I did these at such a lighter weight than anybody, it wasn't just like mass on mass. And so I have never seen anybody documented move as much weight with the level of frequency that I did to do that. Usually it's like a couple times a year, maybe, that you're moving those loads, not every single freaking week and sets. So like my deadlift cycle, the last 3 months, I would deadlift between 900 and 950 for 12 to 15 sets every week. And then I would also stand on a small block and do deficits on another day, 12 to 15 reps in the 850 to 900 range. And if you go talk and look at like some of the most epic like deadlifters in the past, and I remember, God, I can't think of his name right now. Really famous deadlifter, but he was talking about a year that he did more than 12 deadlifts over 880 pounds, 400 kilo. And I did that every week, twice a week for months on end. So
that's insane. So,
but it's all about building capacity. And that's a lot of leading into, this discussion as well.
So let me just say this, guys, for those of you who train for the mountain, for those of you who train, shooting your bow, whatever it is, you're not overtraining. Like, that's my biggest, like, people are like, I don't want to overtrain. I'm like, dude, you train 4 times a week for an hour. You're not overtraining. Like, you'll be fine. So anything you want in life, like, it's possible, just work for it. I don't want to dive too far into this, but it's my pet peeve when people are like, yeah, but you get to shoot your bow every day. And I'm like, but you can too. Like, make the time. If that's what you want, go out and get it. Like, and people are like, yeah, but I have a job. And I'm like, me too. Like, but if you want to find time to shoot your bow, yeah, there's times right now it's 4 degrees where I live. So today my shooting was in the garage at 8 yards. Like, yeah, I'm not saying I go out and shoot every day for 5 hours, but like I find time every day to shoot a couple arrows. And today, strapped for time, kids are home from school. So today it was between reps, I was shooting my bow. So I would, do a set and then shoot my bow once, do a set, shoot my bow once. But that's how I find time to do those things. So I just want to make that note. Like, if you want something enough, you'll go out and get it. So don't sit around complaining that, you don't have the time, or it's too hard, or it's too difficult. I've been on both sides of that coin where I make excuses leading up to elk season, then I get on the mountain and I die. And then I've been on the flip side where I'm training my butt off thinking like, yeah, but I'm just over exhausting myself. But I get into the mountain and I'm running up the mountain. Like, I've been on both sides of that coin. And let me just tell you, the latter is the better. Like it's better to just train your butt off and then succeed rather than make excuses and then get your tail kicked.
Well, it's a matter of deciding. It's a matter of deciding whether something's a priority or not. Because a lot of people will say it, and you just have to be honest with yourself. We had this discussion. Like I did a lot of hunting growing up, fishing. Like I did this but for me to fit that into my life now, I would like to. But to take it to the level that I want, I have to make a choice of like what my priorities and what I want to do. And I need to follow through then on those commitments. And so many people fill their time with nonsense and you don't even realize it. A lot of people get busy and put things on their list and their tasks. They make you feel like you're getting things done and you're knocking stuff out, you're checking things off the list, but is it really, really adding value and moving the things forward that you say are important, that fit your values in life? And there's so much fluff in there where you start cutting that out, where you start thinking about your life and how you can align things so that you're covering many of those things at once. And yeah, life is not about being able to accomplish everything, but there's so often these things that people think that they can't fit in is just a matter of not being honest with yourself. And the second with cutting out the nonsense. And the easiest way to do that, I find, is to cut everything out and then start adding back and go, does this truly, what I have to do right here, add value or fit my values in the way that I want to live? And if so, we're going to add it in. But first, so the first thing is just don't do shit. And second, if you have to, try to automate it. And last, if you've got employees or your manager, like, you outsource, but delegate or outsource, you could pay someone else to do things. Like, make sure that you're putting your time on the things, because no one else can shoot that bow for you. But someone else could mow the lawn for you, but, it's going to cost you, X amount of dollars to do that. Well, what's that going to take away from? Okay. But maybe do a push mower and you're going to get your fitness in at the same time. So now I'm knocking that bucket off so that it's not all things stacked on top of each other.
Yeah. No, absolutely, dude. And, if you want to figure out like why you're not succeeding in certain areas, look at your money expenditure and look at your time expenditure. Like, if you're spending, $400 a month on fun time, like movies and amusement parks, whatever you spend fun money on. Like, if you look at all those things and figure out half of your budget is going to cigarettes and beer every month, then you're not succeeding in fitness or hunting. I always say that too. If somebody's like, man, I wish I could afford to go on these hunts. And I'm like, dude, you buy a pack of cigarettes a day. Like, put that money in an account and all of a sudden you're on an elk hunt next month. Like, and not only are you having money for that hunt, now your lungs aren't going to be destroyed when you're on that hunt. Like, it's all about looking at where your time and money is going. That's what's going to show me what you're passionate about. Yeah.
So like, everybody wants to look at somebody else and put them on like some special pedestal, and maybe they are, but they've also built their life because they said that this is their priority. So when I was running a corporate career, like, I had 150 employees, I was turning around a company. Like, if I didn't perform my job, we'd all be out of. So it was very important. I had a wife at home. I had 2 kids. They were young, and time was a very big essence for me. So instead of finding another gym or finding people in their training times, which I had to have, I literally created my own gym and leased a facility, 5 minutes from my home, so that I could create this environment and draw people to and say, this is the time that we're training. These are the place, like, they're setting up and paying the membership, which is paying the lease and so on for it. But I created this environment that I'd run straight from work, right there, be able to get my training, turn around, get to my house. And I wasn't fully 100% that level. So I was training 3 days a week at the time, but I was able to get to world class. But then when I wanted to go grand goals and push things even further, I reframed my life. I made my work doing that so that I could focus more on that and create more time for my family and my kids as a priority. It's a matter of just like mixing those things and focusing on, what it is. But it didn't involve going out to drink with my buddies on a Friday night, watching the game on Sunday, going to golf on Saturday. It didn't and I'm not saying any of those things are bad. What are your choices? What are your values? What do you want to do?
Guys, when it comes to hunting and being outdoors, I believe there's one product that I use more than anything. That's not my bow. That's not my boots. It's not my anything else other than a binocular harness. If I am outside doing anything outdoors, I've got a binocular harness on. Whether I'm shooting, whether I'm hanging tree stands, whether I'm out hiking, it doesn't matter. If I'm outdoors doing just about anything, I've always got my binocular harness. Alaskan Guide Creations does it and does it very, very well. I've been using these now for about 8 years, and I absolutely love them. The new system with all the magnets are really good, really accessible, very customizable. Guys, if you're in the market for a new binocular harness, I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to check out Alaskan Guide Creations because they are phenomenal. I'll tell you what I really appreciate about you. I really like the guy, and you're not the only one, but one guy that I had on the podcast, Ranch Fairy. You guys know who he is. He's just a nut. Like you would think this guy is he's so crazy and so just out there, but he's very well informed. He's very well knowledgeable. He's very well studied. And that's what, if you look at snippets of Chris Duffin, you're like, this guy is just a maniac, running around with an axe, chopping shoes in half. He's crazy. But he's also very, very well educated, very well informed on the foot and ankle. And so if we're going to prioritize our feet, figure there's no better way to do that than have on the Mad Scientist talk about our feet. So just so everybody knows, let me just show you this. This is a barefoot style boot. And Chris will go into really what that means, as opposed to just a zero drop shoe or a zero drop boot. This is a barefoot style boot. Now, you guys know I'm passionate about Schnees. So this is a mountain boot. This is a Schnees mountain style boot. This is a Timberline. So it's got a heel. It's a very stiff chassis. It's a mountain boot. It's made for running up and down the mountains. It's got a lot of ankle support built in. I am not against Schnees, even still. And I'm going to get into my opinion, as I talk through this with Chris, but he very well might change my opinion of mountain boots completely. My opinion is that, I don't want to get into that yet. I'll get there. So first, let's just talk about the difference between barefoot style and just a zero drop shoe. Because you guys, Barefoot makes shoes as well. And I'll tell you my only pet peeve about this boot here in a little while. Cause Barefoot makes shoes, but you also make boots. So what is a barefoot style shoe? Why was it designed? Why does it even exist?
Yeah. So like you said, you started lifting without shoes. I was running around the mountains without shoes as a kid. And when I started my work and wearing dress shoes, what's that?
I thought you was from Arkansas when I heard that part about you.
And I started getting issues, and actually I was trained in workplace safety and health, did ergonomic studies, all that sort of stuff when I was in my career. And I really started finding this disconnect in what we were being told, which is that we treat the foot like different than every other part of our body. Like you use it or you lose it. I mean, this is really simple. If you break your arm and put a cast on it, the muscle starts atrophying. Like this is really simple, basic human physiology, right? And yeah, there's times I'll put a belt on, but I don't wake up because I want to enhance my capability at that period of time. But I don't wake up and put a belt on in the morning or wrap my elbow in the morning when I get up and wear it all day, every day. What would happen if I did that? Like say my arm hurts. Okay. My elbow hurts, I wrap it. It feels better. Not saying not to do that, because you might need a temporary relief when it's been overused. But if I woke up every morning and wrapped that, what would happen? My arm would get weak and it'd have more potential for getting injured. And I would start compensating and start getting injuries elsewhere in my body. I mean, this is just basic stuff. Same thing with, those, Home Depot, and they got all the workers with the belts on. I think they're doing a lot less of that because, the research is really clear that you're actually causing more back injuries. Of course, they're moving the back injuries to their home when they're not wearing it now. So it's not covered on their workers' comp insurance. But the same thing is happening, right? So it's not bad, and you're going to perform better still in it, but you have to physically use everything in your body to develop resilience. Because if you don't, the body does two things, right? It starts creating protective mechanisms. So you start losing, the body will start restricting the movement around a joint. Okay. So let me do a car analogy. If you have a vehicle that has traction control, the little button on there, a lot of people think that if the traction control's on, I'm going around a slippery corner and one wheel starts slipping, it's going to take the power and put it to the tires that are gripping. And that's not what it does. And we've copied that same, how the body works, into the vehicle. So there's a brain, there's a nervous system, there's a powertrain, right? And then there's connection to the ground, your feet and the shoes, or your feet and the tires on the car. And so what happens is, when you're going around that corner, the wheel starts slipping and that sensor picks it up and it says, danger, danger. You're going to go off the road and you're going to wreck the car or potentially kill the person. So it detunes the engine, reduces the firing pattern, it reduces the shift patterns in the transmission to slow the output. And that reduces your risk of injury, is depowering the system. And our bodies do the exact same thing. So if I can tell the body it is safe and strong and stable, it's going to enhance the neurological output. That's why I lifted without shoes. The better connection, the better. If I have slipping, the body is going to detune. If you're picking up a bar and you're picking something up and it's slipping in your hands, your force production goes down. It's not just the gripping. This is the same thing. If we're slipping on something, if you're trying to run on ice and you try to slip, you cannot put out as much force, just plain and simple. So you have two factors going on. One is reduction in power output, and two is starting to now protect. That's where you start losing. So people, I don't have any foot ankle mobility. Well, yeah, it's because you're weak. I'm sorry, excuse my language, but I'm trying to point that out. Like, it's not the problem is not your lack of ankle mobility. It's the fact you have a weak foot. And so I started saying this like 15 years ago. People said I was crazy. Where's the science behind that? I'm like, where's the science behind the shoes everyone's wearing? I'm like, because if you start looking at all the research, do a simple meta-analysis of like orthotics as an industry, you will find that there is nothing beyond a 6 to 8 week period of time where it provides temporary relief that it adds any benefit. So if it's passively supporting you and restricting your movement long-term, what is it doing? Basic human physiology. You're getting weak. So it's actually instilling long-term problems. Like, again, injured because I'm weak, because of my bicep, I wrapped it, or it's moving elsewhere and I hurt my right shoulder because now I'm putting, more stress somewhere else. Like, those things start happening. So now that's why we have so many back injuries and knee problems and so on. The list goes on and on and on. It really just comes down to spending some time using your foot and ankle complex. And I'm like, but I got to have my arch support. Teaching yourself to passively sit on something is doing exactly the opposite of what you need to do to strengthen and actively control that arch. The second, it's like, maybe it's like, I love this. I did a video on plantar fasciitis. Essentially doesn't exist, by the way. 95% of all cases, because I say no, that doesn't exist. 95% of diagnosed cases of plantar fasciitis, which is overuse, right? So that's where we're going to go in and put arch supports, do this stuff because it's an overuse issue. 95% of imaging That's
Shows
ultrasound, MRI, and now biopsies of tissue show it's an underuse. It is an atrophy and lack of blood flow in the tissue and then related tendinopathy that is creating the issue. So yeah, there's tendinopathy, but it's because you haven't been using it. And so like, let's say that's where the narrow toe box, like restricting the big toe, huge, cuts off blood flow. So it comes down to how can I instill movement in blood flow for my foot so that I can enhance its strength, right? And if I put a strong foot in that boot that you had, like it's still going to perform better, but I have to spend the time to develop it. Now, so a minimal issue, so a zero drop, people's like, oh, it's just about the drop to take out the arch. No, it has to be able to move. You have to be able to move and articulate and use the foot. That is the difference, right? So too much cushion, too much limited movement, and we've got problems. Now, that said, anytime we have like where we have a potential like over application of force, we have a higher risk of injury. So this was going to get back into the safety stuff, right? Like, hey, if I've got an overhead crane and I could drop something on my foot, I'm probably going to have a safety shoe. But it's about balancing what you need with the right environment, but also make sure that you're not losing your time in there. So like locking up your ankle. So just like the ankle support piece of it, that rigidity that people think that they need for hiking to reduce injuries, it's actually going to send the issues elsewhere because now we're lacking movement here. So you're going to end up having an issue somewhere else. I mean, it's just simple fact. If we restrict the movement around one joint, it's going to pick up elsewhere. So I really, wherever possible, we want to keep as much movement, but still add the thing. So what's important when you're outdoors? Puncture. I don't have something go through my foot. I'm running through the brambles. I got sharp things at me, sharp rock. Like, so everything's now about compromise. So in your environment is how can I get the best benefits of like this open toe box and ability for the foot to move, but still be able to create that, create that level of protection. So everything is now what is the right for that environment. So like if we've got an athlete that's got a sport specific like shoe under very high force production, we may have that. We're not saying like don't put on your sprinting shoe, but you're also going to spend most of your time in another shoe developing or a natural foot developing as much as you can, and then limit the amount of time that you're in that. And again, make sure it's mated for that environment. So
bingo.
Extra security for the environment is what you need for that foot in an outdoor environment. But if we start getting too much restriction, sure, it might make your foot less sore, but your calf's, you're going to end up with an issue with your quad or your calf or the other areas that you're feeling is just a matter of because, the tissue doesn't have the capacity to handle that load. You need to develop the capacity. I know I'm going on a big rant here, but that's all it's about. Like
that's perfect.
You have to, like you talked about, like you got to get ready for the season. You got to do your strength training. You got to do your work capacity, your cardiovascular to be able to climb and be going for days, right? Well, you have to develop the capacity in your foot too. So if you don't do that, it's going to be weak and sore. But if you try to compensate by restricting and going, wow, now I can't move, it's not going to get sore, you're going to take the load somewhere else.
Yeah. Bingo, dude. And that's really what changed my mind. And I was making a push for a heavy deadlift. Now, don't laugh at me, Chris. I was trying to hit 500.
Ooh, that's solid.
And I was trying to hit, and I was pushing and trying to pull more weight. Well, my knees started hurting. And so I started going to the chiropractor. And the very first question he asked me, what shoes you wearing? And I'm like, no, it's my knee. And he's like, yeah, what shoes you wearing? And I told him, he's like, yeah, that's why your knee hurts, dude. And I'm like, wait, what? And I mean, at this time I was naive. I was dumb. And he's like, change your shoe, dude. Your foot in that shoe. And he definitely didn't recommend a barefoot or even a zero drop. But he recommended a much lower drop and letting your toes spread out in the toe box. And he's like, you're cramming your toes in a tennis shoe and you have all this drop and all this support. And And so that's kind of what started that progression of moving closer to a barefoot. But it's exactly like you just said. I view this boot right here. I view this just like you just said as a elbow strap or a belt that I'm going to train in. So yeah, I don't want to wear that all the time. I want to wear this or a barefoot style shoe. I'm a big fan of all the barefoot style shoes, but I want to wear this 90% of the time. And then when I hit the mountain, I put on my belt or my, my elbow wraps or whatever. I put that on to be more protected in the mountain. That's how I view this. That's how I look at this. But when I put this on, my foot and my ankle are so much stronger than they used to be because I've been training my foot and my ankle by wearing these. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I would challenge most people like that. You got to be like, you need protection from the environment, from cuts, abrasion, heat, cold, all those sorts of things. But being able to, you're climbing over a log or up on a rock and being able to move that toe structure, being able to cue off of that if you're climbing something is going to give you a more tactical, awareness of your environment and ability to move much better and distribute the load properly across the muscles. And that's where the Bearfoot boot has come in, where we've got this really great premium leather. We've got a thicker sole, but it's all about compromises in those areas to be able to maintain that. So yeah, it's not going to be an OSHA approved like work boot because it's just not going to meet those standards of like what they need for material selection, but it's going to be an absolute amazing piece for somebody that is, out there doing what you're doing. And so, that is, that's literally what the boot is designed for.
Now,
but, if I'm going to go snowboarding, I'm going to lock my ankle down and use a snowboarding boot.
Yeah. Well, that's one question I get a lot of like, how do I choose a mountain boot? Pick a boot that's going to give your foot. Don't get a narrow toe box that's cramming your toes into a boot. Like when you put a mountain boot on,
the insole.
Do what?
Pull the insole out, set it on the ground, and then step your foot on top of it and see if your toes splay out over it. Now, the thing is, if you start using, it's like, it's just coming down to finding the right shoes. Well, you've been wearing cramped shoes your whole life. Trust me, they're all cramped.
Yeah, you have. Yeah.
And your foot will actually start widening over time, which is good. And as you develop that strength and all those intrinsic muscles of the shoe, but that's a great way to see if it's sized right for your foot to begin with. Where you're at right now is pull the insole out, stand on it with your foot, and look at where it's at.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So that's one thing that I always just tell people, like when you go to choose a boot, and again, we're talking specific, mountain boots. But yeah, wearing these,
I would also take that sole and grab it and try to manipulate it and see how much movement you can get. So there's front to back, but also take it and grab it in a little bit of a twisting movement, because we've got two different arches of the foot. One's, across the front. It's more of a mechanical, the interface of the bones, but there's ligaments in between it. And then we've got the softer structure of the plantar material on the longer arch of the foot. So they operate at different frequencies based on so it actually creates more of a twisting or rotation plane of the foot, even though structurally that's not there. So being able to see that it can move like that is going to allow you to see that I can get blood flow. That's going to help my recovery, right? If my foot's getting blood flow as I'm out all day for 8 hours, like that's going to recover much better overnight than when it's locked down, cramped up. And again, not putting force all in one area because I'm not able to actually use the foot properly.
Yeah.
But you got to develop the capacity too. Like you have to spend the time, like, hey, do some calf raises without your shoes on and spend some time at the top, at the bottom, like do some single leg split squats, do some light running or sprinting, down at the park, like somewhere, where you can try to start developing the capacity. Treat your foot like you would any other thing. So that also means, you mentioned not overtraining. The time for overtraining is when you start training something that hasn't been trained, like when you haven't developed the capacity. So you don't walk into the gym and go, I'm going to squat 225 for 50 reps. guess what? You ain't going to walk for a few days, right? So you ease into it. You have to progress and develop the capacity to do so. So if you have not been using and you go, hey, this is the answer, you put it on and you go out for a 20-mile hike, guess what? You're going to be hurting. Just like if you went in the gym and tried to do 3 hours of squats, you're going to be hurting, right? You haven't developed the capacity. So you have to build that up. So I recommend, like, if you're doing it, take a transition. Don't overthink it. Like, take 20% of your week. Maybe it's one day, maybe a couple hours, whatever it is, 20% of your time, and spend it in a minimalist shoe for 2 weeks. And if you're still sore, keep doing, it at that rate. If you're not, go ahead, add a little bit more time, right? Just like training. That's just how you would like, hey, I'm recovering really good now. I'm going to add some more weight. I'm going to add some more load, some more set. Like it's not complicated, and there's no like program. Everybody's going to recover at a little bit different rate. I can't tell you like do 20 pounds for 3 sets of 10 this week, and now you're going to be ready for this next week. Everybody's a little different. Like there's some guidelines. Start with a little bit, add some more.
Bingo. And that's what, like, guys, I know if you're watching this and you've never heard of a barefoot style boot, like the thought of heading into Colorado with this on your foot for a week terrifies you. And I get that. I get because it's something, it's a new ideology because you've been taught your whole life that you have to have this stiff mountain boot to run around the mountain. I get that. And to be honest, I'm still in that stage of like,
but the research does not show that at all, by the way.
Right. And I get that mindset of
hiking with lockdown ankles. Yeah.
But man, that's a big step to take. And I get that. And that's why, like, again, even if I'm going to train for the day and I'm putting a 30-pound pack on to go to the dam for 10 miles, like I'm going to wear this. I get that. But then when I want to spend a week in the mountain, and I have the hopes of packing out an elk, having 200 pounds of meat on your back coming, descending 4,000 feet. Like I get wanting to have this on my foot because we're going back to the idea of like, I'm strapping up or I'm belting up for a big lift. Like I get that idea, but I still want to train that foot and ankle to be stronger in this. That way, when I put this on, I'm better off. So I get the point of both. So what do you say to the guy, Chris? I got 2 questions for you about barefoot, pushing the limits of barefoot.
Yeah. So you're spot on. If you're like in an overload capacity, you've got hundreds of pounds on your back and you don't want to, twist an ankle or do something like that. Like there's an argument for that. Right. But yeah, at the end of the day, everybody needs to spend some time using their foot. If you don't,
bingo.
I mean, it's basic human physiology. You're going to be weak, which is going to lead to problems. Does your back bother you? Do your hips bother you? Does your knee bother you? You probably got some aches and pains somewhere. And if you don't now, that's probably because you're in your early 20s or something. You're going to later. But the other side of that is the performance. And so I just encourage everybody to spend some time using that. And so our products are a tool. It's a pathway to help support that. Now, the research does show that wearing a minimalist style shoe, a barefoot style shoe, develops as much strength in the foot and ankle complex as a dedicated foot strengthening program. But you can just spend some time like outside of shoes and work on developing it without our product. So I'm not telling you have to buy our product. You can go develop and use it's just a pathway. It's not the fix. You are the fix. You getting a stronger foot and ankle complex is the answer. At the end of the day, the boot that you're showing, the barefoot boot, the barefoot shoes, they all have an impact and influence on it, but you are the answer. And that's what I'm talking about.
So what would you say? I mean, I could be wrong, but are you going to encourage somebody, a marathon runner, to run a marathon in a barefoot style shoe?
There's people that do it. There's people that do them completely barefoot as well. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's an interesting thing. So now running on pavement is not a natural environment. So there's some impact stresses there that will cause, especially if you don't ease into it, edema of the bone. Right. So that is an issue with doing that on like a pavement hard surface if you haven't developed the capacity again to do that. The other side of that, though, is a raised heel and a raised toe creates an overstride. And as you overstride, it creates an open scissor, which is the diaphragm's relation to the pelvis. And as that does that, you have over-lengthened tissue in the front and tighter tissue in the back. You also have lack of control in the hips from that now passive, and you have to support and prop that up with an arch support. So what are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with back problems, hip problems, knee problems. And those are prevalent within that. So everything's a balance. There is a really, really cool insole called Blue Maca. So Blue Maca makes a thin insole that's patented around its ability to absorb shock without having a massive amount of cushion in it. So those are my go-to as it relates to that. They're also really great for anybody that wants to transition into. The other is it creates a really great like texture, feel, and grip in there. And so this is the Blue Maca right here. So you can see it's super thin, but it's going to reduce that impact. So actually anyone that's in your field, I would highly recommend checking them out. They're a little expensive, but they feel tremendous. You've got just like a great grip and connection in your shoe. But that would be something too. If somebody's doing a lot of work like on the pavement or something like that, where you're going to have some more impact forces. But you just got to ease. You don't have the capacity. Earn the capacity. Do the work.
So what do you say to the guy now? And guys, listen, I do think there is a line. And Chris, we might disagree at this spot. I do think there is a line where you have to have. I mean, if you're headed into sheep country, maybe you have to go to a stiffer boot with a ankle support. But is there that, because there will be guys that say, yeah, dude, but you've never seen where I hunt, you've never seen the mountains I'm in. What do you say? Is there that tipping point where you say, okay, if you're in sheep country, like you've got to have that boot. So where is that tipping point? But what do you say to that guy who, yeah, but dude, where I hunt, you got to have that boot on. Because my answer would still be, well, if you feel that way, that's fine, but you should still be training your foot and ankle in a barefoot boot.
Yeah, it's not my job to convince everybody if they don't need to. I mean, it's all a personal decision. When I started doing what I was doing, people said you couldn't squat without a high top shoe on, or to support your ankle. And I squatted and deadlifted more than anybody has. And now a big part of the industry does the same thing. So, the science is clear, the physiology is clear, but, everybody's, where they're at with their capacity and their, where they're sitting, their beliefs and whatnot. Like that's, either going to buy in or they're not. Man, maybe they'll be fine. Maybe they'll end up with some issues long term. Just I don't have anything to say. Yeah.
Well, and again, because it goes back to hey, it's okay to have differing opinions. One opinion has science and proofs that back it. One opinion is just what you've been taught your whole life. And guys, I'm not saying that I completely disagree with you if you're saying that, because like I've already mentioned, like when I head to Idaho this year, I will strap up in a Schnee boot. But the year leading up to that,
I think it's pretty comparable to like the NFL with the ankle wrapping, where people are like, you got to do this. It's been in it for so long. But you start looking at the research and you start talking to the high performing players, and you'll find that they're not doing that. They're using barefoot style shoes. They are spending time strengthening it, and they're performing better on the field without the injuries. Unless, like, again, a 300-pound lineman lands on an ankle, like that's another thing. But there's always freak accidents. Can't stop a tree from falling on you, type of stuff. But then again, like what are you going to wrap up? It's all compromises. So, but yeah, that's an environment where it's just been, you have to do this before you go on the field. You have to do this before you go play. And, you'll see, like Lane Johnson, good example. I had him on my podcast. He'll be airing here in the future, but it's he dives into it. So he wears the Bearfoot shoes, never doesn't tape, wears the Bearfoot boots if he's got to wear a boot because he's a hunter and a fisher. So he wears the Bearfoot boots for that. And that's the story. It's like what you've been told, but you look at the research and then you look at the people that test it and do the work, and they're finding a different story.
Yeah. And that's what, going back, I've got 2 pet peeves about this boot that I'm talking to the guy that can help change that. If it's 4 degrees and I'm going out to hunt, I ain't wearing this, gentlemen. I'm going to put on like a rubber boot that, 1,200 grams of insulation, to keep my foot warm. Not because that boot is built to go in the mountains, but I need my foot warm.
Yep. And if I'm going to be out mudding in 2 feet of mud, I'm going to put on some big, long waders.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's the right tool. Find the right tool for the job. Think of your footwear as the tool. Find the right tool for the application.
I've only got one real pet peeve about this boot. Because I have long time said if I'm whitetail hunting, I am not going to wear any leather on my feet because leather holds scent. So if I'm walking to my tree stand and I've got a leather boot on, I'm tracking the scent into my tree stand. So I wish that you guys could design a boot to go out hunting that's not going to hold scent. That would be my only concern.
I'm not sure we can help you with that. We deal with natural materials, not the synthetics and stuff.
Not fakes.
Yeah. By the way, our hides are from North America too. So
that's awesome.
From the USA. So these are all from most of them are from the Midwest area. But yeah, all our leather material comes out of the USA, and then we do the assembly in Mexico. Really great family oriented manufacturing facility that's multi-generation, and so it's really great to be able to support those individuals as well. So we've got it's very rare in the shoe industry and boot industry to have, working wages for every community, within the chain, sustainable materials. We think about conservation, and our choice with leather is the fact that it is both warm and breathable at the same time. Now, you're talking -4. That's a little different. Although, my partners were based in North Dakota. So it gets down to -40 and stuff like that pretty regularly.
Yeah.
And very, very superior to a lot of synthetic products when it comes to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. It's 4 degrees and I'm wearing my barefoot boots like for the day. Like just going out if I need to go to Walmart or, wherever. But if I'm sitting, stagnant in a tree stand for 6 hours and -4.
Oh, absolutely. Sitting.
Then I definitely want something warm. Yep. I got one more kind of question and topic for you. Cause I asked you before we started, like your lifestyle would just scream hunter, most big, strong dudes, want to eat a lot of protein, a lot of clean sources of protein. I recently had on, last year, Joey Zapmary, national champion strongman. He came on a hunt with me, never hunted before, wanted to start killing deer, for that very reason. He's like, dude, I want clean sources of protein that I can go out and source myself. It's a lot cheaper, than buying, beef, bison, whatever. So your lifestyle just screams hunter. And so I asked you why you're not a hunter. And you alluded to, because when I was a kid, it was a necessity. That is lost on the world. Like they don't understand like hunting because I have to eat. Now don't get me wrong. Yeah, I eat all of the animals that I kill. But if I don't kill something, I run to Walmart and buy food. Like my family's not going to die if I don't kill something. So what's that like, man? Having to hunt to eat. Like if you don't hunt, you don't eat.
Yeah. I used to wake up, my parents would be, heading up to the mine, and, I'd go out in the meadow and be catching grasshoppers, and then I'd get enough of grasshoppers, be feeding them on my hook, and I'd be walking down the little stream, pulling out, brick trout through the day so that we could eat when we got home. And, maybe trying to find a puffball mushroom or some morels. Shaggy mains were always easy on the gravel sides of the dirt roads and stuff like that. And yeah, you learn a lot of things like, porcupine, you got to skin it really fast. It otherwise tastes like crap. And they are you can put a bullet in their head. They don't really die. Best way is kind of, something a little more aggressive. Baseball bat, nice, easy way, but sounds a little graphic. But, this is the way I lived growing up. And so it's not to say that I'm disinterested in hunting. I definitely have thought about it many times, but again, it comes back to the value proposition as well. And it is different for me to go, hey, I want to go do that versus, I did a lot of that. And it's a matter of like, what are my values? Where do I want to put my time? Because I want to take things to a world-class level. And I can't just go, you know what, I'm just going to, go up, get, for the season, for a couple days and go hunt. Like I would go all in, and, that's a whole huge, another piece of my life where, I've got 3 businesses, I've got a family, I've got there's a lot of things on my plate. And so it's a matter of like, what is important for me?
Yeah.
Yes, that would very much fit very well in my life. And you could see that as a whole. But the pieces of my life that would fill for me, I have filled elsewhere.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, man. So Chris, where can they find you at, man? Where do they follow you? Where do they find Bearfoot Shoes? Give them the rundown.
Yeah, it's not too complicated. I'm really easy to find. So if you just go to a social media engine or you go to Google and you type in Chris Duffin, but like muffin, but with a D, I'll pop right up. I'm most active on Instagram and LinkedIn for social media. You can go to my personal website, chrisduffin.com. It'll have links to Bearfoot. It'll have links to Build Fast, Kabuki Strength. And if you sign up for the email, you'll get exclusive discounts for those. My new podcast, Architect of Resilience, is launching this week. There'll be a link on there as well. So that's a nice, just great central hub, especially being on the newsletter, which can give you access to a private Discord community, all that good stuff. So, that's where I'd go. Or if you're just interested in checking out the Bearfoot boots, just go to Bearfoot, BEAR, foot.store.
Just like Bear Archery, but barefoot. Guys, if you run any kind of supplement for your deer, which you absolutely should, there are things that deer need. And I have found that when I run supplements for my deer, it keeps them on my property so they don't go wandering off onto other properties looking for that thing that they're needing. And so I have just dove fully into running minerals and protein for my deer all year long. Buck Bourbon does supplements and attractants really, really well. Whether you're looking for a long-range attractant like the 110 proof, or whether you're looking for a feed that you can run all year long in a feeder, or even just on the ground in their barrel proof, Buck Bourbon has what you need. I can tell you story after story of going onto a new 500-acre piece, dumping out some long-range attractant, and deer just coming into it. Guys, it will make a difference in the way that you see your deer come in. So, guys, I would highly encourage you to check out Buck Bourbon. You can use code HUNTING101 in all caps to get 15% off. But I would just encourage you, no matter what, to start running some sort of supplement for your deer. It'll have a happier, healthy herd. You'll keep them on your property more, and you can better manage those deer. Guys, go check out Buck Bourbon. Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hope to have you on again soon, man. We're starting a series. This is the first time it's been announced. You guys know, you're familiar with the Cook Wild series. We're going to be starting another monthly series called Train Wild. We're just going to have on industry professionals from Mountain Tough and First Form and some different trainers and athletes in the space to give you some training tips, how to prepare yourself for the mountain, how to prepare yourself to be a better hunter. It's a series I'm really excited about. Look for that coming in March or April. That's going to be a new monthly series. Bearfoot has come on board to help push that and promote that and talk more about the training of the ankle and foot mechanisms. So it's going to be a fun series. We're going to talk about all sorts of training, all sorts of rehabbing injuries for the mountain. And it's just going to be a really cool series. So make sure and stay tuned for that. But guys, thank you so much for listening. Y'all have a fantastic week.